This program is brought to you by Emory University.
On October 30th, 2013, the Center for Faculty Development and Excellence at Emory University hosted a discussion titled Teaching with Public Scholarship. The panelists explored the opportunities, challenges, and differing approaches for incorporating public scholarship into their teaching and curricula. The speakers were Tracy Yandel, Associate Professor of Environmental Studies, Vialla Hartfield-Mendez, Professor of Pedagogy and Director of Engaged Learning in the Center for Community Partnerships, and Karen Levy, Assistant Professor in the School of Public Health. In this video, Professor Hartfield-Mendez illustrates how teaching about public scholarship provides students with tools to become scholars who are engaged with their communities.
I take a little bit different, more bird's eye view of this for this presentation. I also have done courses and just kind of been down in the nitty-gritty with the community engagement piece, but in the role that I have now, I work across the entire campus, and so I think a lot about this idea of an engaged campus. So that's where I went with this teaching and public scholarship idea, and with the idea that teaching and public scholarship is really also teaching of public scholarship, that we are modeling this with our students, both graduate and undergraduate, that we're giving students all the tools they need to, in the future, do this, or in the present, also do this. And so that, for me, is kind of this bridge to community engaged learning, pedagogy, engaged research, all the kinds of things that Tracy just described. And to this notion of the engaged campus, there's actually a whole book called, that has engaged campus in the title that I draw a little bit of this from, but this is kind of my putting together what I think an engaged campus. What are we trying to do when we say engaged campus? So from my perspective, the aspirational, and I think we're still here, even though Emory is at the forefront in a lot of ways in this area, I think we're still in kind of an aspirational stage, because in my sense, you know, the engaged campus would be a woven whole, as I say, with all kinds of activities, programs, offices, all sorts of things that make sense to various parts of the campus, but also make sense to the community beyond. We're getting there, but we're not completely there yet. Not necessarily in lockstep, not everybody has to do it, it doesn't always have to look in the same way, but that there's a kind of a coherent intentionality on the campus around this, and that there's a consonance with the educational mission of the university or college or whatever it is, whatever institution of higher learning that you're looking at. That I think we do have. This aspiration for the engaged campus for Emory is very consonant with our mission statement and the vision for the university. And then this idea that campus constituents are aware of the institution's positioning and intersectionality with regard to the surrounding community and beyond. What I'm doing right now is part of that. I'm helping you guys to understand, right, some of the intersectionality and the positioning of Emory. Community engaged learning, scholarship and service are considered and developed in a lot of places on campus, not just in a couple of pockets on campus. So I obviously work in the Center for Community Partnerships, but that's not the only place in the world that on Emory's campus that this is happening. It happens in Rollins a lot. You know, that's what Rollins School of Public Health is so much about, especially in BC, right? But it happens in other places as well. And for me, it's really important to connect all the dots, to see the linkages and create linkages between the conversations about public scholarship and the conversations about community engagement and the conversations about service learning and the conversations about public health and public engagement, public policy and the rest, right? It really is all part of one whole. We just have to begin to see that sometimes we're not talking about exactly the same thing always, but we're talking about things that are part of the same thing. And then this idea that everybody, staff, faculty, students, administrators, key, that they're able to recognize their own roles in community engagement or in this idea of public scholarship, that each of those groups of people have potentially different roles. Sometimes they're changing roles, but that they can take sort of ownership of those roles and actually see a path forward and see with whom they need to work on campus to make things go forward. And that community partners can be connected to different parts of the campus in these multifaceted and complementary relationships that are not necessarily in any kind of lockstep. This is important. So with the School of Public Health, for example, there's so many points of engagement with the Atlanta community. The Center for Community Partnerships is also very engaged in a whole bunch of places. There are other, the law school with its clinics is very engaged in other points in Atlanta, but there is a way in which all this can make sense together, and some of it has to do just with knowing each of the parts, knowing what the other parts are doing, and helping the community partners kind of navigate all that. So for the past, I'd say 15 years or so, Emory has really been in this process of developing its sense of its relationship to the Emory community in a more intentional way. You can think about Atlanta in lots and lots and lots of different ways. Obviously, if you think about, healthcare, there's one a certain lens, water, racial issues, affordable housing, the environment. We can think about the Atlanta area with regard to transportation. What about safety? What about sustainability that Tracy's been thinking about? With each one of these lenses, there's a different way in which public scholarship or public engagement or community engaged learning and pedagogy can be developed or can play out. But they're really all connected. You can't really pull out one of those threads without sort of getting to another one. Poverty would be another, for example, economy. And then if we think about Emory, it's important for all of us to understand, and I think most of us do, but we do, there are times when we forget that we're pretty monolithic. And that there's a way in which Atlanta engages with Emory that when we're inside Emory, we don't really understand, okay? But there's 9 units that are significant, nearly 14,000. This is from 2012, so about 14,000 students, about 25,000 employees, and huge economic impact. That means that if we're trying to engage with our community, we have to understand ourselves as a giant. And in, it's 15 years ago, between 2000 and 2005 or so, there was this huge development. Actually, in the late 90s, there was this really intensive development of all kind of partnerships, all across the Atlanta region. And this is a snapshot in 2005 of all the places in which Emory was engaged in schools. So you can see the kind of scattershot. So in the strategic theme process, in that planning process, one of the things that happened was that the subcommittee that was focused on this said, well, it makes a lot of sense to have a place-based strategy. So we actually went to a place-based strategy where there's a bit more coherence. You look at kind of certain areas and try to bring to bear a lot of resources to a few areas without excluding all the other partnerships, but trying to be just a bit more focused. So this is one of the ways in which we tried to do this. The Center for Community Partnerships is another way in which the university has sort of acted on this intentionality and about coherence. And what used to be called OUCP, Office of University Community Partnerships, is now the Center for Community Partnerships, with these objectives about coherence on campus, so collaboration among the units, providing this more navigable sort of way in which community partners can at least have a few points, at the Center for Community Partnerships being one of them, where they can find navigators. I think of these health navigators that are helping with the ACA now. But navigators of this labyrinth that is Emory, and sort of they don't have to understand all of the complexity of Emory to understand how to engage. And then creating these pathways for students, very similar to what Tracy has talked about, where you've got lots of different opportunities for students to, over time, broaden and deepen their community engagement. So one of the things that's happened is that over time, All of these efforts really garnered a number of national accolades. So Emory is one of the first universities to be classified with the Carnegie classification of community engagement in both areas, so in the area of service and in the area of academic engagement. The National Honor Roll for community service, and participation in a number of national consortia and institutions. And so Imagining America is one of those. And Imagining America is a national consortium of about 100 institutions across the entire United States, focused on arts, humanities, and design as kind of being at the heart of the matter in public engagement and scholarship. And there's this kind of additional focus that they're developing on civic engagement and the kind of renewal of democracy, thinking about arts and humanities particularly, and design, as ways in which we can actually approach this renewal, that institutions of higher education really are and should be more at the heart of this kind of idea of what are the next steps really for a thriving democracy. There's a research in action project called Building the Architecture of Full Participation that Emory has been engaged in and will continue to be engaged in, I'm hopeful. There's this public online journal that Allison mentioned, where a graduate student last year, graduate fellow, and I co-authored one of the feature articles, and were delighted whenever they decided that, yes, it would go in the first issue of this journal, because it sort of is part of Emory's participation in a conversation sort of pushing the envelope in lots of different ways, not so technologically, but in other ways as well. And we're going to be hosting the national conference in fall 2014, so that means that it won't be necessarily on Emory's campus, but that Emory will be one of the host institutions, or the principal host institution. One of the things that I think is really important about this is that hosting the conference is a huge opportunity for people on the campus to engage in all kinds of conversations. So to engage in conversations with people across the entire United States and internationally about public scholarship, about the arts and humanities particularly, to sort of present some of the work that we're doing, and to understand where the boundaries right now are and where those are being pushed in this national conversation.
The preceding program is copyrighted by Emory University.